You are listening to Norfolk Noir.
Welcome to Norfolk Noir, the podcast where we dig up crimes, legends, and forgotten folklore buried deep in Norfolk's past.
Hi, I'm Elisa.
And I'm Jake.
And in this episode, we're heading back to the year 1807 to a small, rural village just south of Norwich called Attleborough.
It was here that a woman named Martha Alden was hanged for the murder of her husband Samuel. The case became known as the Cottage Murder, and it's a story that's haunted Norfolk ever since.
Some say it was an open and shut case. Others believe Martha may have been wrongly convicted.
And on top of all this, there are now stories of a ghostly figure said to roam the grounds near where the Aldens once lived.
So was Martha a cold-blooded killer, or the victim of a rushed justice system? And does her spirit still walk the land where she met her end?
Well, let's go find out.
This is the story of Martha Alden, a wife, a mother, and a convicted killer.
Martha's husband was called Samuel. He was quiet, hard-working, and well-liked. They lived in a small cottage with their young son. Everything, for them, seemed ordinary. Well, that was the case until July 18th.
That evening, Samuel was drinking at the White Horse pub with his friend, Edmund Draper. Draper testified that Martha was there too, but she left early to take their child home.
Draper and Samuel stayed until nearly midnight. Samuel was a bit tipsy, but walking fine. Draper accompanied him home, saw no signs of trouble, and left.
But what happened after that changed everything.
Just before 3 a.m. on July 19th, a local man named Charles Hill was walking past the Aldens' cottage. The door was open. Martha was standing outside.
She greeted Hill casually, saying she'd just gone to fetch water from the garden pit, but something about the scene felt off, like it didn't quite fit the hour or the mood.
The real shock came 2 days later.
On July 21st, a widow named Sarah Leader was out looking for her ducks when she noticed something strange in a nearby pond, something floating, half submerged.
At first, she couldn't make it out. When she returned the next morning, what she saw confirmed her worst fears. A man's blood-stained corpse lying in the water.
The body was pulled from the pit. It was Samuel Alden. His face had been hacked, his head nearly severed.
A search of the Aldens' home uncovered a bloody billhook, partially cleaned. In the garden ditch, a shallow grave. Nearby, a spade Martha had borrowed from her neighbour just days earlier.
Then came the most damning account.
A woman named Mary Orvis, a friend of Martha's, told investigators something chilling. She said that on July 19th, just hours after the murder, Martha confessed.
Mary claimed Martha showed her Samuel's body, lying dead in the bedroom. Together, they stuffed the corpse into a sack. Martha dragged it across the road and left it in the garden ditch. The next night, Martha returned alone and threw the body to the pit where it was found.
Mary later helped Martha clean the house, scrub the walls, was told to stay silent, or else. And here we have Holly Smith, a local historian from Shoebox Experiences.
Martha Alden has gone down kind of in history as this abusive, violent woman that murdered her husband unprovoked. And actually, we disagree with that telling. It's pretty dark, but we actually think that she was really quite abused. There's been a lot of research into it, and it turns out that that isn't really the full story that's been portrayed. So from our point of view, it looks like she had quite an unhappy home life. There are clues in the story that you can read. You can actually read the trial, and in that there are some big clues, like for example, she left and went home early. Her husband was deposited home drunk many, many hours later, and it was only a couple of hours after that that she'd killed him. Her neighbours helped her cover up the crime with no questions asked, almost like they knew that something was going on. So we actually think there's been a little bit of a adjustment in how that story was portrayed to the public back then. But yeah, it's been a really big story in Norwich's history, but it all kind of spawned from this ghost story of this woman that haunts the castle jail cells.
But Mary's testimony came under fire as she was seen as an accomplice. The judge warned the jury to treat her story with caution, but if it matched other witness accounts, it couldn't be ignored.
And it did. The jury took only a short time to deliberate. Martha Alden was found guilty.
She later confessed, confirming Martha's involvement in the murder. On July 31st, Martha was drawn on a hurdle through Norwich and hanged at Castle Hill.
Castle was a prison, right? So, and allegedly, from the Guildhall to the castle are tunnels which, so they didn't have to walk the prisoners out. Yeah. They could transfer from one to the other.
So there used to be, at the bottom of the mound, there used to be a gallows, and that was the Castle Ditch's gallows. So that would be your city hangings, not your county hangings. And there was a man called Robert Goodell who was hanged for the crime of murdering his wife, but the hangman got the measurements wrong, and so the rope was not the right length for this man's weight and height, and so when he dropped through the trap door, his head got ripped off.
Her body was dissected, as the law required.
She died with decency, reports say, but the brutality of the crime, the mystery of motive, left a scar on Norfolk's history.
Why did she do it? Rage? Abuse? Madness? Even now, it's still debated, but some locals still swear her spirit lingers at Norwich Castle, where the truth was almost buried for good.
We went into Norwich City to hear the public's ghost stories.
My cleaner on Christmas Day, he was looking out the window downstairs, and this was about 6 in the morning, and he saw somebody walking across the road and down through my car park to go down the river, and he thought, oh, they won't get through there because the gate is locked. And then he suddenly realised this person didn't come back. He realised he couldn't see his feet.
I mean, I've not seen a ghost. I've not seen anything that kind of makes me think that there are ghosts, but just sometimes maybe you might walk into a place and you might feel the energy that was left there by that kind of free space and time.
The Guildhall. It has served the city since about 1412-ish, all the way through until like 1985 it was a prison. And there's a really famous murder connected to it, which is the murder of a different Martha, Martha Sheward. Have you heard of Martha Sheward? No. So Martha was a older woman. She was the 9th husband of a man called William, and unfortunately for her, she didn't get a background check on who William was. After an argument one day, again, very heavily speculated, it's made out that she's kind of like this screaming, murderous woman, but he had just gone and spent like hundreds of pounds at the Great Yarmouth docks, and they had an argument over it. Now, I don't know about you, but a couple of £100 in the Victorian times is the equivalent of thousands and thousands of pounds today, so I'd be quite miffed too, yeah? But they had an argument, and in retaliation, he slit her throat. Now, he lived in Tabernacle Yard with her, which doesn't exist anymore, but it's near the Adam and Eve pub. Being in the city centre, he needed to dispose of the body because he obviously didn't want to be hanged for this, but he had to get quite like ingenious on how to get the body out. And unfortunately, it spawned a really dark kind of turn of events because he basically cut her down into as many small pieces as possible and distributed her all across Norwich. So he cut chunks of her flesh off and then went for a walk and threw them into like grass and mound and all over Norwich, like all the way down to where Trouse kind of, I think it's like a skiing centre is now, all the way up to Deeren Road and stuff like that. So chunks of her flesh all over the city. He got like bags, buckets of her bones, weighed them down with rocks and dropped them in the river. And the thing that doesn't ever, like, it haunts me, and I've read a lot of dark history, but the thing that haunts me is that her head was so identifiable because she had this like beautiful, long, curly, red hair. So he shaved her hair, distributed that across Norwich, and then boiled her head until her bones were soft and crunched her head down and threw the slop in the gutter. I think it's more horrible because even though there is this now ghost story of a man with buckets on the river, like throwing body parts in, and you know, you have that ghost story, it's worse because there's a real story behind it and like completely proven. And it took 18 years to find him and sentence him for what he did as well. So she's buried in the Guildhall to this day because 18 years later no one came to collect her body.
A lot of places that have been around for a really long time have that rich history, but I think Norwich in particular has this really rich kind of paranormal, ghostly kind of history behind it. What do you think it is about Norwich that gives it that in particular?
A few things there. One, you're right, anywhere that's been around for a long time has deep history. I truly believe most ghost stories spawn from a real bit of history. So the more history you've got, the more likely you are to have impressive stories and thus ghost stories. Norwich is known for, I don't know if you've noticed its little tagline of like City of Stories. We've always been known for being storytellers. I mean, I want to say 1578, Queen Elizabeth I visited here and there was this whole storytelling pageant like laid on for her. We've always had this history of it in all our finer details as well. Even like the cathedral bosses in the roof, they have carvings through them that tell stories, which is something that is, although not unique, it is not common. Deeper history, I think you get more stories. I also think that people don't expect it from Norwich. In our recent history, we've become not a central city of England, but for a long time, you know, we were the second city. We were thriving, and I think when you go to somewhere and you think it's going to be quaint and sweet, and then it turns out it's got all of this stuff to unpick and unravel, I don't know, I feel like that gives the stories that you tell a little bit more, I suppose, excitement, because it's somewhere that you didn't expect to find all that information. And plus, I just think the people here love telling stories. It's like written into us. You go down the pub, you cannot go to a pub in Norwich and say you're not local without one of them locals telling you a story from Norwich. It's almost like written into us. We love storytelling. So do I know why? No, but do I appreciate it? Very much so, because you can always find out something new.
That's all from this episode of Norfolk Noir, where fact and folklore walk side by side.
We've explored the chilling case of Martha Alden, a woman convicted, executed, and remembered in both court records and ghost stories.
Over 200 years later, the truth is still unclear, and maybe that's why her story continues to haunt Norfolk.
If you've got information, family stories, or local legends tied to the cottage murder or other Norfolk mysteries, we'd love to hear from you. Reach out on social media.
And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. It really helps others find us too.
Next week, we're diving into a much older and even darker tale, the story of William of Norwich, a boy whose mysterious death in 1144 sparked centuries of fear, myth, and anti-Semitic legend.
It's one of the most infamous cases in medieval history, and it started right here in Norwich.
Thanks for listening to Norfolk Noir.
Until next time, keep your eyes open and your torch on.